All right, so let's go over these on your own problems. Just so you know, I'm not going to take as much time with the actual factoring as I did in the original video. So if you need practice factoring, go back and look at some of the other videos for that. So the first thing we're going to do when we solve these equations is check and make sure our equations are equal to 0, which it is. And then the next thing we have to do is factor this equation. So go ahead, use your box, and make sure your numbers go in the right spots. So what we're looking for here are factors of -4 that are going to add up to, -4 that add up to -3. Okay, so -2 times +2 is going to give us -4, but we want to add up to this middle number. So think about your factors. If this number is negative, it means that one of our factors has to be negative. Okay, so it could be 1 times -4, could be 2 times -2, or it could be -4 times 1. Okay, so these are the factors that are going to add up to -3. So I'm going to put those in the boxes. And then I'm going to start looking for my GCF. So let's clear up some space. All right. The greatest common factor between this column here is going to be a -2. And looking here, the greatest common factor here, oops, I never put a squared on this. This should be 2x squared, is going to be x. And what we're going to do then is this is our first factor, x minus 2. And we're going to look at the other factors we need. So x times 2x will give me 2x squared here. And -2 times 1 will give me this -2 here. So my other factor we have here is going to be 2x plus 1. Okay, and remember this whole thing equals 0. So our next step is that we're going to take each factor, make it equal to 0, and I'm probably going to do these two steps together, solve each of these equations. So I'm going to take this first factor, x minus 2, make it equal to 0, and then I usually just go right ahead and solve it. So x could be +2. And then I'm going to take my second factor here, 2x plus 1, make it equal 0, and then I'm going to solve it. So subtract your 1, so we get a -1, divide by 2, and we get x equals -1/2. Now, if we want to double check these, I put a graph right here. Oops. And we can see our two factors, x is 2, and then x could be -1/2. Okay? All right, on this one, double check. Make sure you have an equation that equals 0. This does not equal 0, so we have to make it equal 0. If we have 15, the way we get that to be a 0 is we subtract 15. So we've got x squared minus 4x, oops, not plus, 3 minus 15 is going to give us -12. All right, so time to put it into factored form. First, we're going to put our x squared term right here. We're going to put our -12 down here. And I'm looking for factors, when I multiply these together, factors of -12 that add up to equal -4. So think of your factors of -12. Again, when you have a negative number here, that means you're going to have one positive factor and one negative factor. So these look like they could be our factors, except if I add them together, we're going to get a sum of +4. So that's not the one we want, so we're going to keep going. All right, and I'm going to stop right here because I know -6 times +2, that gives me -12. -6 plus +2 gives me a -4. So let me put those in here. I'm going to put my -6. I'm going to put my +2. And then I'm going to make some room. Get rid of this. And you'll get to the point where you can do that in your head, which will be nice. All right, looking for your greatest common factor. In this box, it's -6. In this box, we're going to have an x. So one factor is x minus 6. We're going to go sideways here. If this is x times x gives me x squared. This would be a 2. X times 2 would give me 2x. And remember, this whole equation equals 0. So time for my last two steps. Make each factor equal 0, and then solve them. So x minus 6 equals 0 means that x could be positive 6. And then if we take x plus 2 and make that equal 0, solve it, we see that x could be negative 2. So looking at our graph, so one of our values is negative 2, that's right here. Our other value is positive 6, which is right there. Okay. So again, start off, double check, is it equal to 0? If it's not, you have to make it equal 0. So the way we make negative 30 into 0 is we add 30 to it. We've got x squared plus 11x. Oops, that looks terrible. Plus 11x plus 30 equals 0. Remember to keep this in standard form as you move things from side to side. All right, so we're looking for, put our x squared here and our 30 here. We're going to look for factors of 30 that add up to 11. So I know off the top of my head 5 times 6 is 30. I also know 5 times 6, or 5 plus 6 is 11. So those are going to be the factors I'm looking for here. So I'm just going to put them in. 5x, 6x, and now it's time to use my GCF. GCF in this column is a 5. GCF in this column is an x. So my first factor is x plus 5. And then I'm going to look at my other factor going across here. This is x. X times x is x squared. This is going to be a 6. So I'm going to get x plus 6. Remember, set each factor equal to 0, and then solve. So x could be negative 5, or we have x plus 6 equals 0, which means that x could also be negative 6. We'll just take a double check, look at the graph, and we can see these are really close together, but we have our negative 6 right here, and we have our negative 5 right there. Okay, so those are our two solutions. Now there's one more problem like this. We did one of these in the other paper. Remember, this does not have 3 terms. It's equal to 0, but it's not in factored form, and we're missing our last term. So the way we factor this problem is not using our box. What we're going to do for this problem is look for our GCF. You want to look for the greatest common factor you have between both of these terms. When I look at my numbers, I can see they both can be divided by 4. They both also have an x. So my GCF in this problem is going to be 4x. So the way we factor with our GCF is that GCF becomes one of your factors. So you're going to pull 4x out as a factor, which means we're going to divide each term by that 4x. What's left over once you do that division, that's going to be your second factor. So 4x squared divided by 4x is going to leave me with just an x. And you can tell because if you multiply these together, 4x times x gives you 4x squared. Now here, 8x divided by 4x, that's going to leave me with just a 2. And so now we have our two factors. Right here, x plus 2, that's one of the factors. The other factor we have is 4x. So when we solve this problem, we could see that x could be 0, or x could be negative 2. And a lot of times kids will think they made a mistake. They don't realize that they could get a value of 0 for this. But if you look at your graph, you can see that value of 0 just means your parabola is going to go through at 0. Okay? So this is how we find our solutions using factored form.